Hey there guys, DMO73 here, bringing you another feature match for the week, featuring two of the new rulers. Today I am showing off, Josh and Joe are helping me show off a red-blue soul burn deck and a 5-color Lumia control list. So these are just kind of initial ideas for each of the rulers, places for you guys to get started if you haven't already looked, and just to kind of give you an idea of how the new mechanics work for these new rulers, how they function, and kind of what synergizes well with them, at least as a first draft. So really looking forward to showing you guys what this stuff looks like. I think both of these rulers are pretty awesome, so let's just go ahead and dig right in. So Josh is going to be on the play. He's deciding what he wants to mulligan away. Decides to ship away a Steam Blast. Doesn't really feel like he needs that right off the bat. As you can see, there's a Blessing of Yggdrasil in Joe's hand. He's probably trying to, ramp up. So we get started. We get that first stone. Do hit a Magic Stone of Vaporization for Josh. Plays the Wizard of Altea, Combat Wizard, to put another counter on Soul. So Josh's whole game plan is to kind of put as many counters, mana counters on Soul as possible. Out comes that first bow for Lumia. Gets Ruler's Memory off the top. Plays a Flame Sprite. Pings the Combat Wizard for 1, flickers the Combat Wizard, and then pings it for another 1, or flickers the Flame Sprite with Lumia, and then pings it for 1 more, so 2 damage. So Combat Wizard is off the board. So Lumia is the thing that lets you flicker. So at the end phase, you get to flicker a creature you control. He's going to go ahead and awaken a Time Bomb. Joe's going to go ahead and let that resolve, and he's also not really going to respond to the Time Bomb being cast, or to the Time Bomb's trigger. He could use his Energize to use Demon Flame to kill it, but he decides to just go ahead and take the 1,000 damage. The Time Bomb, when it's awakened, gets to detonate at the end of Soul's turn, which does 1,000 to the board and then 1,000 to the player, as opposed to having to wait until the beginning of the Soul player's next turn. It's pretty strong. Joe's going to go ahead and use the opportunity to play a Blessing of Yggdrasil, getting another Ruler's Memoria. Since Josh going to have to tap out for that turn. He's also going to play another bow. Josh getting a little ahead of himself there with calling for stone. Gonna play the I can't remember exactly what its name is, but it's the 2-drop that you can sacrifice it to put 2 mana counters on your ruler. Essentially, it's a commitment to mana counters later that also serves as pressure on the board now. I think that's a fantastic card for Soul, being able to have it, because it's not like wasting your will or anything. You'll see right there, out comes a Lucifer, and he just sacrifices it for 2 counters. So it's essentially a delayed mana source. Will source for Soul that also can put damage on board if needed, which is really good. So Josh is in an interesting position here now that he's got to be staring down a Lucifer, because that Lucifer is going to get flickered every turn by the Lumia. So if he doesn't answer it, it's just going to keep getting bounced and replayed, and if he has any creatures, they just keep getting put back onto the board. But he doesn't have any response kind of there. During the upkeep, Josh is going to use his Magic Stone of Vaporization's effects to put some extra mana counters on Soul. Again, it's that idea if he's just stocking up to be able to do kind of a finale spell or something like that and burn out the game. Looking at his hand, he's got a Lightning Strike. He's got a couple Charlottes, a Rune of Soul, World Flame. World Flame is a really strong card, I think. The fact that it has 4 different modes and you get to choose 2 is really good for Soul, I think. And a lightning strike. So Josh is just deciding whether or not he wants to do anything here. But at the end phase, Joe's going to go ahead and flicker in a Melfi, which makes total sense. It's ramp. Hits that Apollo. Swings in for 9. Josh is going to take that, go down to 22. He's going to take an additional 3, going down to 19. He's going to call for a stone. And because there's no resonators on board, it doesn't really make sense for him to use Lumia on Lucifer, so he's going to use Lumia on Melfi, so he has access to more will on his turn. Josh again using mana counters, adding mana counters with Magic Stone and Vaporization, and then he's also going to Lightning Strike Joe. So Joe's down to 25, so pretty close life here. That Apollo does make World Flame a little bit of an interesting play here for Josh. If he 800s the board, he won't even kill Lucifer, and Joe can just bounce the Melfi back to his hand. And then if he's trying to kill some stones, he can just, float the will with Melfi, float the will with the stone, and then just replay the Melfi after the fact. So World Flame doesn't really do much here if that's the modes he's going for. He's going to go ahead and cast Rune of Soul and search for something. I imagine he searches for probably a Time Bomb in this scenario. Time Bomb is better because it's going to actually clear the board while also putting pressure onto Joe. So he does decide to grab a Steam Explosion, which is also an interesting idea. This will also get him to be able to, deal damage to Joe's face. I can understand why he wouldn't grab the Time Bomb, though, because it has to survive, and from the looks of it, with all that open will, Joe probably would have some kind of answer to be able to kill the Time Bomb before it goes off, and Josh doesn't want that to happen. So he's going to go ahead and just use a Steam Explosion to try to kill Lucifer and to deal 10 damage to Joe at the same time, who's just going to save it with the Apollo, which makes perfect sense. But it still is going to do the 10 damage to his face, so he's down to 15, so perfectly within burn range. Going into Joe's turn. Pays 2 to play a Hera, to pop one of his own bows to draw a card. That kind of makes sense. He's trying to probably draw into Nyarlathotep here, so that he can use life gain with Lumia. The bows really aren't doing anything because Josh just isn't playing Resonators. Does play the Hydromonica, so next turn, as long as he's not dead, he can guarantee a Nyarlathotep for the lifelink with Lumia, which is nice. He's gonna hit Josh for 3 with the Melfi, might as well. Calls for a stone. Hits a Magic Stone of Heat Ray. Thinking about whether or not he wants to play the Lucifer, so that he has lethal on board, next turn, forcing Josh to have to deal with the burn as opposed to instead. And he will catch that he needs to flicker the Melfi, don't worry. Lumia's triggers are mandatory, so she has to flicker something if she can at the end of a turn. Before the upkeep, Josh is going to go ahead and use Rune of Soul. Gonna grab Ancient Heartfelt Fire, potentially. I would immediately use that. I would have immediately used that as Josh to use the 1 mana counter he's got to ramp up to 3. So yeah, there, like I said, there's catching the trigger from Melfi. It is mandatory. I don't know why he waited until after upkeep, because he had 1 mana counter available, unless that's the coin, but he went first, so that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, so see, he could have just used that during upkeep with the mana counters from that he already had, as opposed to wasting a stone to do it. I don't necessarily know what the plan was there. So he uses Symphony to generate 3 will for ancient spells, casts those to activate World Flame. It's gonna deal 8 to the board and 8 to Joe. It's gonna float the will. Gonna let Hera and Melfi die. He's gonna cast his character there. See, if he had done it during upkeep, instead, he might have been able to do like a steam. He might have had the 1 extra will open to be able to do like a steam blast or something like that. To maybe use, instead of the will production, he maybe could have used the giving something remnant, but it's not nearly as strong here. And the problem is now Josh is just going to use that Hydromonica to stack Nyarlathotep on top, and Lumia is going to swing in for 1,000 with lifelink, immediately swapping the life totals in a sense. That's one of the advantages that Lumia does have over Burn, is that if you can get the Nyarlathotep, then you can, you have a solid lifelink source. And with that second bow in his hand, Joe's going to be able to, even if he tries to block with the well, first off, Lumia's effect will trigger and he'll flicker, and so that creature will be enrested, so it won't matter. But even if he didn't, he would be able to just bounce it, or he would be able to just bow it to death with the 2 bows, since he has 1 in hand. He decides to go ahead and play the Lucifer though, just to go ahead and stack it out of the way right now, and then he's gonna swing with Lumia, gain 10, lose 10. Also important to note that Lumia's effect here is mandatory as well, so that Lucifer should actually be rested, because it is the only creature on the board. Lumia has to flicker something if it's possible when she swings. So these are just important things for you guys to know. Unfortunately, Josh is sitting on just nothing in terms of real big bodies. He just has creatures in his hand. It only costs 3 to Judgment Soul, I believe, not 4. He's gonna go ahead and play 2 Charlottes in hopes of, stalling for a bit. But those Charlottes don't have any form of flying, so Lucifer just gets to swing in and kill him. So I think that's probably game, and I think Josh probably scoops here in a second, just because there's no way that any of this, there's no way that either of those Charlottes affects the Lucifer at all, and he's at a life total low enough that Lucifer can just swing and kill him. Even though Charlotte's protected from all of the, can't be flickered by Lumia, can't be bowed by the bows, anything else. So he's looking at all of his counts, he's looking at where his life total is. And yeah, he sees that he can't really do anything, so he's just gotta go ahead and scoop the game. Yeah. So we go into game 2. So game 2 here, Soul is going to choose to be on the draw, seeing if maybe having that mana counter or that extra will from the will coin is going to be any helpful at all. Plays a Flame Sprite after playing the Apollo, deals 200 damage and then flickers out the Flame Sprite with Lumia. Having an untapped Flame Sprite on your opponent's turn in a deck like this is very helpful, because you can run things like, like he has Demon Flame and stuff, and Flame Sprite can just turn into, one, it's a damage dealer, and then it also becomes a removal spell, because you can just ping something for 1 damage and then Demon Flame it, which is pretty strong in my opinion. Josh hits the Aloof Researcher's Memoria, and unfortunately doesn't want to spend his will coin quite yet, so he just has to pass the turn. Takes another 200 from the Flame Sprite, who then... Oh wait, no, he doesn't swing with the Flame Sprite yet. He goes ahead and plays... Oh yeah, he did. So he swung with the Flame Sprite, and then plays the Blessing of Yggdrasil to get another stone, so continuing to ramp further ahead. Josh hits his Magic Stone of Vaporization and still didn't get to play anything. Another Flame Sprite swing happens, taking him down to 34. Plays another Apollo. Josh hits a Brutal Conqueror's Memoria. Pays a blue to play the other wizard. Put another counter on his guy. And then simply passes the turn. So pretty slow turn for slight game so far for Josh. Joe go ahead and pings the wizard during the upkeep, and in response to that, Josh is going to go ahead and lightning strike it so that he can't use it again to kill his gentleman. I still would have probably used the Ancient Heartfelt Fire that was in my hand for that instead of the lightning strike, because the lightning strike is also burned to face, and the Heartfelt Fire can just immediately burn something for 4 damage. And he also would have had an actual will source open. He could have used one of his mana counters for it, but that's just my personal preference, especially since he has 2 Heartfelt Fires in his hand. I would have just cast them both, or I would have just cast one and killed them that way, and then you could use the lightning strike on Joe's face. Heartfelt Fires can't do burn damage to the player. During the upkeep, he spends his last will from his stones to play a Heartfelt Fire and put 3 mana counters on Soul. It's a little bit more efficient. You get more mana counters out of it that way. Spend 4 to play Charlotte. Who, when it resolves, will be very large. Just a matter of if Joe lets that resolve. He does. He chooses to lets it resolve. It makes sense. He plays Lucifers and things that can, and Flickering Lucifer to kill it. So it kind of does make sense to just let it happen. Let it be on board. Besides, he also knows he's playing against birds, so he needs to kind of save that cancel spell in his hand for when something a little bit more devastating gets dropped. Plays the Flames right. Pings the Combat Wizard for 1. Probably would just push damage there, in all honesty, rather than worrying about the Combat Wizard, especially since he's about to probably drop Lucifer. But he actually just decides to pass, and then Lightning Strike is going to come out on the Flame Sprite. Maybe he spends the Will Coin. He'd go ahead and decides to. He has it in response to the Flicker trigger, so we're in end phase. So before Flame Sprite will actually get to flicker in and deal some extra damage, he's going to go ahead and kill it with the Lightning Strike. So that was a better play. I still would use Ancient Heartfelt Fire over a Lightning Strike, because those 2 Lightning Strikes would then put Joe at 30 instead of 40, which is just less room for him to worry about for burn later on. Especially now that he's got this Charlotte that's going to be just dealing massive amounts of damage. It put him even closer to winning the game, so put him down to 28. So he'd be at 18 at this point if he had cast those 2 Lightning Strikes, and that's well within range of an Invitation of Disaster or Steam Blast. Anything like that off of a Soul Flip would just put him in range to just finish the game off. Essentially, those wizards are serving as protection for Josh from Lucifer. He's just trying to make sure that Charlotte stays on board for as long as possible, which makes sense. It's also pushing him damage, and he really can only use things like Lucifer to kill it. So Joe taps for a stone, hits another Blasting Waves. His 1 brings out another Flame Strike. And plays the Lucifer. So out goes the Wizard of Altea. 2 damage to Josh. Josh is thinking about whether or not that's going to go through. Decides to let it, so he's down to 32 at this point. Josh is adding extra mana counters to Soul with his Stone of Vaporization. Could go ahead and swing again for another 14 damage. Gonna go ahead and just block with the Flame Sprite, which makes perfect sense. Sacrifice a Flame Sprite as opposed to letting all that damage go through, especially since that Lumia's or that Charlotte's as good as dead next turn if he doesn't answer that Lucifer immediately. He's gonna cast Ancient Heartfelt Fire, go up a couple mana counters. Cast 2 for, oh no, he's going to save it for later, I suppose. going to spend 7 for a Steam Explosion to deal 10 to Joe and 10 to the Lucifer. If I was Joe, I'd probably cancel that. That's probably the spell that I cancel. But instead, he can just choose to bounce it back to his hand. Bounce the Lucifer back to his hand with the Apollo, which also makes sense, because then he can just let him sacrifice the Charlotte, and that's going to get through anyway. Then he just has to take the 10 damage. Or he could do both. He could completely cancel it and bounce no, that wouldn't make sense. He can just completely cancel it or just save the Lucifer. And he chooses to save the Lucifer and take the 10, so he's down to 18. Problem is then another wizard comes out, and it's going to be able to protect the Charlotte from the Lucifer trigger, and then another stone gets called by Josh. So Josh is doing a really good job here of playing around Lucifer, always having that extra dude on board to keep Charlotte on pressure, so that he can keep jamming damage until it gets to the point where Burn can just finish the game. If I was Joe, I would have possibly even canceled the wizard, but it's based on how comfortable he feels with Burn. If he had multiple cancel spells in his hand, then I probably would have canceled the wizard, just to make sure that then Lucifer could just land next turn and get rid of the Charlotte finally. But alas, he only had the one cancel spell, so he needs to save it for the more important thing, the more important play. He's gonna play 3, 4, and then he's gonna play Lucifer. This is a really strong play, so that's gonna get sacrificed. He's gonna do 3 and do Judgment. It's really strong play, except for the fact that he taps out against Burn, which is usually never a good idea, especially if you have a cancel spell in your hand. Now, if he had Nyarlathotep in his hand, that wouldn't be as big of a deal, because he could just, gain 1,000 life as well. But that is not ideal here. I probably would have just waited. He wants to get that Charlotte off the board, though, which makes total sense. So he's going to swing, and he's going to flicker his Lucifer when he swings with Lumia to make sure that Charlotte finally gets off board, and then Josh takes 10, putting him down to 22. He's going to pass the turn there. Josh is going to add an extra mana counter with the Magic Stone of Vaporization. So he's going to use 2 of his mana. He's going to spend 2 to generate 3 mana with the Symphony. Spend 2 to generate 3 mana with Symphony. Spend 2 to generate 3 mana with Symphony, so go up to 5. But that mana that he's producing with Symphony can only be used for ancient spells. He's going to cast the... this is the interesting little finale piece. He's casting... Alistarus's Velsivaria, Alistarus's edition, and then that gives all of his spells in his graveyard. They can be cast as if they were in his hand, his fire spells. So then he just uses the mana counters to ramp even further, and then just finishes off with a Steam Blast for 32 damage. So that's it for that. And Joe can't answer because he tapped out. I think so he couldn't answer the burn spell. So going to game 3, Joe is going to be on the play by choice, which makes sense. Plays the Hydromonica off the top, so he doesn't have to worry about getting hit by a Ruler's Memoria. Flips of Blasting Waves, out comes Flame Sprite, take 2, and then flicker the Flame Sprite with Lumia. So pretty standard first turn for this kind of control build. You kind of want the Flame Sprites early because they get pretty good, in my opinion. For the upkeep, Joe's going to go ahead and ping the Combat Wizard for 1. Now, if I'm Joe, I'd probably go ahead and play that Priscilla in his hand to finish off the Combat Wizard and then deal 2 damage to Josh with the Flame Sprite and then keep going. When instead, he's just going to use the Flame Sprite to ping the 1 extra damage onto the Wizard. Seems like kind of a suboptimal play, and then the Flame Sprite just gets flickered. But this way, he does have the Cancel spell will up for next turn, just in case Josh plays something that we don't want to see. Plays 2 and plays the creature that turns into mana counters later. Pings it for 1, and then Demon Flames it during the upkeep. It just gets banished and turned into 2. But it's good for Joe to go ahead and get that out of the board and out of the way, especially since he could do it during upkeep. Calls for another stone. It's his Scorched Bales. Plays the Apollo. Swings for 2, taking him down to 36. And then he's going to flicker the Flame Sprite. So now Joe's in a pretty good position here. He's got Flame Sprite, Demon Flame once it flickers, plus Will for a Cancel spell, which is really good. So if there's a big creature that Josh for some reason plays a creature that he needs to deal with, outside of Charlotte, he can deal with it immediately, and he has a backup Cancel spell. Being able to do both at the same time is very, very good for control. Out comes the other wizard to add more mana counters. Another Combat Wizard to add another counter. Looks like he's up to 7 mana counters plus the 1 from the wizard. He's going to spend Symphony of going to generate that 3 extra Ancient Magic Will. And then he's going to attempt to play World Flame. I feel like that gets canceled here. 800 in the board and popping a stone would be pretty bad. So yeah, the Cancel spell is going to drop. Perfectly well timed there. Needs to a spell like that resolving now would be pretty bad for Joe, especially since he doesn't have any like Blessing of Yggdrasil or anything in his hand. He's gonna go ahead and ping that Combat Wizard for 1 damage and then recover. He's gonna ping it again, get it off the board. With that bow in his hand, I don't necessarily know if he needed to kill that Combat Wizard. Just plays the bow, and then he can just use. He can still use the Priscilla to answer this Combat Wizard, but then he can push damage at face against Josh. So he plays the Priscilla to try to kill the other wizard. Josh responds by spending a mana counter to pump up. And in response, Joe spends an extra will to pump up Priscilla, so Priscilla won't die either, but still is enough damage to kill the wizard. Josh looks like he's got a Time Bomb in his hand, but he's got to worry about a Demon Flame, or even Flame Sprite can kill. That's the thing, is that even Flame Sprite can kill a Time Bomb, because it's just a 1/1, so he can just use Flame Sprite to immediately kill it. So he just has to pass the turn. Draws into that Moonbeam Butterfly. Just something he uses to pull out Captain Hook. Which can be pretty devastating with Lumia if you get a Captain Hook to resolve and stick. swing, deal 1,000 damage, flicker it out with Lumia, put 2 more stones away. So you can just take 2 stones every turn if they don't kill it. And your opponent can just get to a point where they just can't ever play the game. They're getting 1 stone every turn. Hits for 6 total between the Lumia or the Prisia and the Flame Sprite. Just gonna go ahead and thinking about what else he wants to play here. He does play. He could use the Moonbeam Butterfly here if he wanted, but it doesn't really make a ton of sense. So he's just gonna go ahead and wait 1 more turn so he can try and do Hook a little bit later. He's gonna flicker the Flame Sprite. Josh is gonna add a mana counter and cast Rune of Soul to go ahead and search. Don't necessarily know what he grabs here. Probably still World Flame. World Flame's probably still the best bet, just because it will help clear the board, and he can set Joe back on stones, which is nice. The fact that he hasn't been able to do any actual damage to Joe so far is not looking good for him. Bird needs to be able to push that damage in, and every turn that Joe gets closer to being in kind of dominance, especially with the lifelink Lumia, that's going to be an uphill battle for him. Plays 5 and 1 and plays World Flame to burn the board for 8. And then I believe he hits a stone. He asks Joe to banish a stone. And Joe makes an interesting call here that I'll talk about in a second that I don't necessarily agree with because of just the impact of it for later. Since he already has Demon Flame in his hand, he decides to use the Apollo to bounce the Flame Sprite back to his hand, and then he actually sacrifices the Ruler's Memoria, which I would have sacrificed the Scorch Bales. He already has 2 black sources with the 2 Ruler's Memoria, and the problem here is, and you see him tap 1, he tapped the Ruler's Memoria for a stone too. The problem here is that the problem with this move is that he gets to choose which stone he has to sack, because it is banish, doesn't say destroy target. And so you can choose whatever stone you want, and Ruler's Memorias are the best, pretty much the best stone that exists. It produces all 5 colors. He's already fulfilled the cost for it, so it makes more sense for him to sacrifice a dual stone that only produces 2 and keep the Ruler's Memoria, especially since he went to go grab a Captain Hook off of the Hydromonica. The other thing, I would have also, off the Hydromonica, I wouldn't have grabbed the Captain Hook. I would have grabbed the Nyarlathotep and been in a position to be able to do permanent imperishable with Lumia and just start jamming 1,000 with a lifelink at Josh. Like, if Josh wants to spend his time, and then he still would have had Will open for like a cancel spell, he would have had Will open for like a Demon Flame. So yeah, because here comes the Time Bomb, and it's going to be awakened, so he's just going to take 1,000 damage, and Hook's going to die. But he'd be at a position where even if he did get Time Bombed, Lumia would have imperishable, so he could just immediately flip and do it again. So that just puts Josh on a super tight clock, dealing with a lifelinker, and every turn that he lets Joe keep Lumia around and keep swinging at him, he's just going to gain 1,000 life. And so that really puts Josh's list on tilt, in the sense of, like, it has to completely change its strategy. It can't just freely burn you. It has to answer a Lumia every turn that has imperishable and swiftness. Uses Flame Sprite. And flickers the flame sprite at the end of the turn. Like I said, anytime you can shift burn off game plan, so where they have to deal with an answer as opposed to just freely casting burn at you, you have this kind of better position. Again, he's got bows in his hand and on the board, as well as Demon Flame, so creatures getting in the way of Lumia really aren't going to do much. Goes ahead and casts the Lightning Strike on the Flame Sprite. Seems pretty mediocre. Again, it doesn't seem like it would be worth it. It's a Blessing of Yggdrasil, which at this point is essentially a dead card, just because he doesn't really need the mana. It doesn't really need the will. Taps for a stone. It's Blasting Waves. Casts Kage's Moonbeam Butterfly, which lets him get a 4-drop, or no, it lets him get a 5-drop, base 6 to get a 5-drop. Gets Celestial Wing Seraph for Lucifer. Again, this is now, he's put Josh in the corner, where now he has to deal with a 10-10 and an 8-8 flyer, or a 9-9 flyer. Otherwise, he's going to get life linked out. So Josh's list is very much on having to shift his priorities. Belzavari is going to come out. Oh, he's going to cast things a little bit differently. He's going to use Symphony first and then play Belzavari, which makes sense. He wants to be able to reuse those spells. So, up by 1 counter by playing a Symphony. Up by 1 counter by playing a Symphony. Goes ahead and casts Time Bomb to try to nuke the board. Time Bomb will resolve. There's a token on the field that we haven't put on the field yet. And then moving into the end phase, he's going to use Demon Flame to kill the Time Bomb. So at that point, it's just over for Josh. He's tapped out. He's only got mana counters. He's got 1 card in his hand. It's a creature. And Joe can just swing, and then J-activate and swing again. So we'll watch it carry through, but that is going to be it for this game. Plays the Apollo, swings in with Celestial Wing Seraph, gains 6, deals 10. Swings in with Lucifer, gain 9, or do 9 damage, put him down to 9, and then he just judgments. He can flicker the Celestial Wing Seraph, but I don't know if he had another Lucifer in his deck. And so the judgment happens, and Josh just says, yep, you got it, because of the swiftness with Lumia. So that is it for the match, guys. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment sections down below. Go ahead and share out this feature match if you thought it was fun and you thought people might want to see the lists. The lists will be up this Friday and Saturday, and so go ahead and subscribe and like the video. And until next time, this is DMO73 signing off.